welcome everybody to the January 6th, 2025 full advisory board meeting. Let's see, I will take a attendance or roll call, whatever. Scott.
Yes.
And Mark.
Present.
And Lee. Present. Peter.
Present.
John.
Pretty sure I'm here.
Linda.
Here.
Dan, like John, I'm pretty sure I'm here as well. I don't see anyone.
Elizabeth.
Oh,
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
hi, I'm here.
Good. How come I can't see you? All right, well, I believe you. You're here.
I'm here.
Anybody else here?
Anyone else here that's? Okay. So. Oh, and Patrick is here. Say here.
Here.
There you go. Thank you. Welcome. So I would, I guess the next order of business is to approve the minutes. Sorry,
We need a clerk.
clerk for the meeting. Thank you. John did it last time. Thank you for that. Anyone dying to do it? Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Linda. It's important that people like that step up and really help the chair.
I wasn't dying to do it.
Does the record reflect?
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying. All right, thank you, Mark. So we have some minutes that John so kindly and so deftly reviewed last time and of December 16th, 2024, seems like a year ago.
Last year.
Does anybody want to, does anyone have any comments or
Motion to approve.
thank you.
Second.
Great. I will do a roll call vote against Scott. No, now you're approving minutes.
Oh, yes.
Okay, Mark,
Yes. Yes.
you guys are way too fast. Lee?
Yes.
Peter,
Yes. Yes.
John, Linda,
Yes.
Dan, yes, and Elizabeth,
Yes.
and Emily, you're here.
Hello.
Did you hear that? Do you want to abstain from the minutes or are you good with them?
Oh, I did not hear that. Sorry, I had to sneak into a conference room. I will do the minutes.
No, you don't have to do that. Well,
Oh. I agree that I approve the minutes. Approved.
Okay.
I'm eager in 2025.
Yes. And Aaron just came in, so, you probably don't want to weigh in on the minutes, or did you have anything?
I don't know comments.
Okay, all right, great. All right, I think that's all good then. Thank you, everybody. The next order of business is a DCAM debrief, which precedes, but it doesn't have to necessarily an update from Megan. Do you want me to do the update on the okay? And then you can correct me, or Mark and or Megan can amend. We did meet with, we had a regular meeting last Friday. And there were a few items that I thought that people might be interested in. I'll mention them sort of as a heading, and then if anyone wants me to elaborate on it, just stop me. So there's a meeting scheduled for the 17th of this month to discuss the wastewater treatment plant. And that's going to be with Alan, and just trying to sort of prepare ourselves and delve in a little greater detail on what the process might be for how and the considerations for taking possession of that.
Is that a discussion for us specifically?
When you say that,
Is it organized for the MCI advisory board or is it?
no, it's broader than that. That's my understanding anyways. I mean, I think we will definitely have some considerations of it, but the nature of it is such that there's kind of, it's a three-legged stool, right? Between the state's needs, our needs, and the towns.
So is it a public meeting or is it?
I think it's no, I think it's.
No, so the opportunity here is for the DPW director and the consultant that he's engaged to pose some questions directly to DCAM about how they're, what they're thinking about in terms of the next steps. So the status is that the state has formally offered the wastewater treatment facility to us with a 6-month time frame for response, which times out in mid-February. So there's been quite a bit of technical work done, and so the idea is to try and get the consultants that have looked at this to sort of compare notes a little bit about, what Alan's team has done so far is they've bucketed the capital needs, which I think he's already said in this meeting would be about $25 million into 3 timeframes, so 1 to 3 year, 3 to 5 kind of, and longer than 10-year kind of timeframe. And get some sort of working understanding of how they think about this deferred capital needs for the wastewater treatment facility, and we do all by way of informing how we might begin to negotiate over the disposition of the wastewater treatment facility. So it's meant to be a staff level contact between DCAM and DPW primarily. And it's going to take place during one of what would normally be one of these DCAM coordination meetings on the 17th.
I thought you were saying it was a meeting that we were all expected to come to. You're not, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I misunderstood.
Yeah, it's only again because that's sort of leading the way, and we actually do have a response to. And sort of what they're looking for in that response is important as what the content of the response is.
Right, and it's, right, an acceptable response at this point could be, we're just very interested. It's not gonna be for detail.
Will it have a discussion, given that the consultant will be present, as to the amount of funds that could be designated to the wastewater treatment plant in terms of the $725,000?
I'm sorry, the consultant I'm talking about is Weston and Sampson, who's been doing the engineering assessment of
I
the.
understood that.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
but they'll be there,
Yeah.
and presumably they would be going on to another phase, and we had allocated some funding for that. Would that be a topic of discussion that then would be informative to this committee? I just wondered that.
No, right. It was not brought up, so I kind of doubt it because of the people that are gonna be participating in the meeting. I think that's the kind of thing that Alan would probably do offline with Weston and Sampson.
Okay.
But it's a good question, and I will keep that. Another update is, Paul, this I think is thanks to the efforts of Lee and Elizabeth and Mark and Rep Cataldo and perhaps others, but there is an anticipated meeting without a date at the moment, sometime in January, with Mass DOT as well. So that was good progress that people would be happy to hear about. We talked a little bit about, there's been conversations about trying to capture aerial information on the site, either for your purposes or other purposes as we're bringing the consultants up to speed. People are poking around trying to figure out what exists. They're not understandably perhaps crazy about additional flyovers with drones or other things. So we're trying to figure out what exists and that we can utilize. And so I will continue to keep you guys informed about that. Paul just kind of weighed in. Paul from DCAM just kind of weighed in. I think it was more editorial in that this struck by this relates to the municipal facilities planning work that we've done. And so what my takeaway from it was sort of that I think, like some of the other folks that have mentioned, that those functions may be better suited to the 229 site, the 2229 Main Street site than they would be for the MCI. That said, I think there's also awareness that it relates to the wastewater treatment piece, that, you know, some of those functions may require some support. And so that's, it was not an in-depth conversation by any means, but I sort of picked up on that. Paul's also at my request developing some interview questions. Then they had asked me if DCAM was going to have a representative at that, which we'll be talking about a little later on in the interview process. I don't believe they're planning to do that. But as I said, they will be giving us some interviews. Questions. And Mark asked, say this himself, but Mark did ask for an update on the timing of the decommissioning. And what I heard was we might have sort of updates and progress in the spring at the earliest. At least that's where we're done. So that's what I had. Did I miss anything important?
Yeah, apparently one of the next steps is there's the surplus properties team at DCAM, which does some kind of transition handover from whatever the operator is, in this case, the Department of Correction. And it sounded like that was getting set up to occur sometime soon. But there's not expected to have been any real changes in the timeline for how long it's going to take the Department of Correction to decommission premises, which was still expected to be about a year.
Okay. That's all I have on the DCAM update. I see tables here. And so the next order of business is an update from Megan.
Sure, hi everyone, happy new year. My main update here is just to announce, I think communication had gone out prior to Christmas that the RFP is live and 35 firms have received copies of it. Shannon put together a handout in front of you if you're curious to who has either been sent it or requested the documents. And if anyone has anyone else that would like us to proactively send them to, we're all ears to help do that. And so we are going to be entering into a pretty crunch timeline. A little bit later this month, we're requesting questions on the 13th, and then we're going to try to turn around answers really pretty quickly to interested firms. And then, as you know, proposals will be due on the 27th, and then we'll start interviewing, and that process will, hopefully lead to a contract award. February 11th is what we're targeting. So that's really my main update today. We are anticipating a lot of coordination with a subset of this group to review the questions that come in. It's not going to be, they're not going to be answered by staff alone, of course, but we will support and maybe provide draft language for folks to help review. So I think the next agenda item is kind of talking through who is going to help on that, Dan, and how you're going to organize that. So we make sure we're transparently communicating with everyone, but also being mindful of, some of the restrictions about quorums and things like that. So that's our effort, Shannon and I and others on the staff, is to make this a really smooth process and to set you all up with everything you need to help inform these next decisions.
Thank you. Okay, so yes, thank you. That's a great segue. What we have talked about, and I've chatted with a couple of folks, we thought it made sense to have a cross-section of representation from each one of the subcommittees. And as I understand it, although this is not my area of expertise, but as I understand it, we have two sort of constraints relative to this, as explained to me by Anthony. We have two sets of constraints. We have an overall number constraint, meaning we have a 10-person advisory board, and therefore we cannot, the max number of people who could participate would be 5. And then that's further sort of subdivided by, this subcommittees. If we want with cross-representation, then we would, set it up such that we would have avoid having a quorum among each one of those subcommittees. So, I have chatted with a couple of people to see, the other thing to Megan's point is, it is going to be, a very demanding, a lot of time is gonna be required once we receive the RFPs. The expectation right now, they're due on the response is due on the 27th, which is a day that we have a meeting scheduled. We've asked them to provide us with at least 10 copies. And so the idea would be that when you arrived here, you would receive a copy, each one of the members, and we would read through it, have the opportunity then to read through it over the next couple of days. At the same time, I don't know exactly who, but folks within the town, staff would be reaching out and doing the reference checking. And so that within a relatively short period of time, meaning 48, 72 hours, could be this convergence of folks from the full advisory board reading through, scoring with the criteria that we have, and ideally narrowing that field of whatever the total number of responses we get down to a more manageable number. Perhaps 3, if there are people that we think are of equal weight, and we might expand that a little bit. And the goal is to be in a position by Friday to notify, no later than Friday, to notify that group of firms so that they can be available for interviews on Monday. We have a snow day, I think, too, maybe a couple of days later. So the point being that it's going to demand a lot of everyone's time, both the larger group and the sort of smaller selection committee. And I can throw out some suggestions, or I can stop now and see what people are thinking. In terms of who, just like Linda is dying to do minutes from this point forward, perhaps there are people that are just dying to be on this committee. Selection.
I'll volunteer for review.
Okay. That's great.
I'm happy to volunteer for the average.
Yeah.
So there is, the third committee would be the, legal and governance.
So, yeah, I'll do that.
All right, so that's 4. That means you and I have to arm wrestle to see who would be the last person. Mark, do I need to be concerned about my involvement on the land use and sort of did we get any clarification?
No, I'm really. How many people are on the land use group now?
I think
5.
5.
So it's already bumping up against the army that will go with.
Yeah, Dan, you and Scott at our meeting had been appointed to do it. I thought you just meant review.
No, I'm actually, I would like you to be involved in it. Yeah, sorry. So, but Lee, do you have some information that could be useful for this?
I don't know if it'll be appreciated, but my professional opinion is that a multi-member board, which means 2, has to follow open meeting law. So the idea like quorums, whether it's the full body or the subcommittee body, isn't really good. Correct answers.
Okay, so regardless, your point is a maximum of 2.
Not maximum, but if you have any more than 1, you just have to follow the open meeting law by posting your meeting.
One from the advisory board or one from a subcommittee?
Any group of 2 or more. So in this instance, it would be however many we end up picking, reviewing the RFPs and interviewing the selected firms. Just has to do that in an open meeting.
Does that mean it has to be televised and, no? So
Noticed.
Yeah.
just notes.
Well, could it be executive session? I'm following what you mean now about that this is essentially appointing a new
It's a subcommittee.
subcommittee. Yeah, I'm following what you mean, but I wonder if these could be posted as executive session meetings.
I think it's borderline. I mean, if there's any question, I would just recommend it, yes.
Could we appoint a selection committee?
Yes. Selection of
A
vendors.
vendor selection committee?
I think that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I think that's what this will wind up being, but now I think it's a, we just need to clarify if we can post these meetings as executive session meetings, because I don't think you want these to be
No.
open meetings.
Right, I think there's a couple of reasons. One is the vendors themselves have.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
have to
they're
hold
charging them.
their proposals. Separate from each other because they're, and also because it's, you know, fairly detrimental to the town's negotiating position to be conducting that sort of thing.
It's also unfair to the vendors,
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah,
like the public participation.
Right.
Frequently, I've seen these vendors just more as a courtesy, bow out of the public meeting, so as to not make that situation uncomfortable, although it's a legal requirement, but I mean,
Yeah.
these vendors do this.
All the time. And, you know, what's unusual about this is normally these things would be handled in, you know, as staff meetings by employees. And when, what we're getting involved with is having you know, us as citizens, we're not employees who are serving on the board, getting involved in that. That's because normally like you're probably dish your big RFP.
How were architects for like the middle school appointed or something like that? How was that
That
process?
was done to the selection, okay.
I just want to share what we did at Massport. So we would receive 20 proposals. And we'd all have to read them before our meeting, our public meeting. And we would have to go through just our summary of pros and cons of each. You just say this is a summary of each proposal you received. And then at the end, you have a vote. You know, amongst the group of, you know, your top three, whatever, you know, so you vote. So, but you're just sort of summarizing their proposals of what you felt about one proposal versus the other, and then everybody goes around the table and then they vote. That's what they did at Massport.
But there's no discussion.
There's a
Not-
discussion.
Was that all staff people?
It was staff, it was even consultants who were, even these guys would show up.
The issue is whether it's a public body, so this is a public body.
It was a public body.
Perhaps it's splitting hairs, but I mean, is there a difference if we say it's a working committee or a working group? You know,
No.
remove the committee from it?
No, I
You can
don't.
call it whatever you want, but-
Yeah, it's a sub.
So if we're gonna have to notice, then we shouldn't really be constrained as to the number of people from the underlying committees that are on it. So that means Dan can be on it and Patrick can be on it as well as representative.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, but I think the outline of what Scott's talking about is that essentially everybody that's participating is doing their own work in terms of evaluation. The first pass, you know, however many of these it comes in, is really about trying to figure out who's been responsive and not responsive.
Right.
And then the second, is so that we can rule out or rule in only those that seem to cover all the bases and then engage in a ranking exercise, which is designed to down select to three, assuming three that are going to receive, you know, invitations to provide a presentation for their proposal. I think then the question, those presentations normally get scheduled as close together as possible, like all on the same day ideally, where the committee's seated. And those are, you know, one at a time, and I'm not sure about having public, you're saying that public was a.
Well, it was a public meeting, so I mean,
Yeah.
people would show up and hear hear all of us go through the proposals. I mean,
Right.
but I don't know if that's necessarily
Yeah, that-
required.
What about the interviews of
The interview,
Of the
they were
firms.
not, they were not public.
Yeah, see,
So that's-
just, in case there's any confusion, there may not be, it may just be my man, but, I think there's two things we're talking about. I think there is the review, as you were just describing, Mark, of
Yeah.
the winnowing down.
Yeah.
And then there is this interview process, and I think having the full committee there, for example, I'm not saying anyone's suggesting that, but having much more than 4 or 5 people is gonna become unmanageable, and it's. I mean, if there's not that much time just to give everyone asking one question, and I'm not sure the benefit of that either, right? So.
Yeah, I would suggest that for the actual interviews, we rely on Megan. You know, maybe some other members of the staff. The town manager is really the contracting authority in this at the end of the day. So, and maybe 1 or 2 members of this body that are at most that are involved in that. So that can be a separate.
Why is that, Mark? Why wouldn't you go with?
For just the reason that Dan was talking about. Because, you know, what you want to be able to do is engage in an actual conversation and dig into what's being proposed. And so I think we should consider who amongst us has the most relevant skills, I'd say, at selecting a vendor for this kind of work and delegate that.
I agree,
task to them.
I agree, I just feel like, I would assume that given the composition of this advisory board. That, you know, in this room, certainly. In this room, that the skills on this board would be kind of most applicable for selecting these types
Yeah.
of vendors.
Yeah.
So if we were like picking a balance of a small group,
Yeah.
obviously we have to have the town manager's office
Mhm.
involved, but the expertise would probably lie more with the advisory board.
So in that regard, does it make sense to maybe identify 3 people that would, I'm not just pick that number randomly, the 3 people that would participate in the interview process?
Yeah,
I mean, outside of the town stuff, to Mark's point.
I think having like whether it's 3, 2, 3, 4, or 5, you know, I think it's just making sure that we feel as a group that we've got the collective expertise represented to best select the vendor,
Yeah.
including the town manager's office.
Yeah, so let's think about this, part of this, for me, part of this is taking advantage of precisely what you just said, which is giving all of us an opportunity, once we've seen the proposals, to come up with questions, right? From our different various experiences and perspectives. That bucket of questions is really important, for me, perhaps the most important thing. Actually presenting the questions is, I'm a little less concerned about that. I say a little bit, because we've all, just in any sort of human interaction dynamics, that, you know, someone's sensibility, someone is gonna pick up on something that someone else may not. And so then I think there's an inherent advantage to that. The other thing that I'm struggling with is sort of follow-up questions. So it's one thing to ask John, for example, and you're in my eyesight, to do the community, to represent all the concerns about community outreach, and then we do our best to present that. And then the response happens in the meeting, and you're like, you know, if you were there, I want to drill down further on this. And that's what I don't know how, that's why I'm not quite sure how to deal with that. I think that may be your point.
So I would suggest, right, that. I like the idea of like, if we have the ability as a broader group to whittle it down, that's great, that would be. Coming out like in preparation for that whittling down, I think having.
You're saying the group, when you say winnow the group of respondees, winnowing that down or winnowing us down? Sorry, I'm just.
Narrowing the vendor list down.
Okay, got it.
Right, great, if we can all participate in that, I think there's like, but if not, also not a big deal. I think the questions prepared should go back to the vendors ideally in written form.
Before the interview?
Before the interview.
Okay.
I think that, like in my business, that's kind of best practice. You don't need to like have gotcha questions on, can you explain? you know, this part of your fee structure, right? It's better to have them have the opportunity to think about it and respond. As opposed to like doing it on the fly.
Are they are they all the same questions for every firm, or they're?
Presumably,
It's not
presumably not,
right.
right? Like it, like the RFP should have the broad, should have had the broad questions, specific questions should be, can you clarify
Okay,
X, Y,
that
and
makes
Z?
sense.
And, can you break this apart? I mean, I'll just.
That would only be for the ones that
And
get through the winnowing down process.
Agree, and it's a good clarification.
Sorry,
And then the last thing I would just say, and I'll stop, is, therefore, I think like it is probably important that we do have a tight group, like selection committee. Because we need to have consistency in questions and evaluation across the firms, right? So like if it's Peter, Dan, Aaron, that we have like a consistent read and kind of consistent questions being asked as you go through.
I think the thing that the only point that I'm sort of personally struggling with is, that when I'm working with folks like this, a big part of, in my experience, a big part of their success is, can they think on their feet? Can they respond? And so giving them any period of time to respond with sharing the questions in advance, it's difficult to get to that, because then it's,
Yeah, I think we should think about the format. I mean, I just feel like that there are some questions that it doesn't benefit, right, from like having.
I agree.
Whereas, you know, we should, I guess the point is, I don't know that we've gotten to the point of thinking about how we want to run the interviews.
We can just
Right.
talk generally about, you know, time frame or presentation and opportunity for questions.
And so, you know, I think that, you would have each firm that's selected run through their own, you know, we give them some sense of how long they would be presenting for. And then it's kind of their determination, right? If they decide to present 50 slides, good luck. If they decide to present the 5 right slides. And then, you know, and so I think that will all factor into how we evaluate them and how we, you know, I think the committee, or those folks that are going to then ask questions. Presumably would have questions prepared, but could also ask questions on the fly.
John, do you have any thoughts on my concern?
I'm not too concerned about it. I mean, this happens presumably hundreds of times a year in the state of Massachusetts. All the discussions are subject to open meeting, the same open meeting law. There's gotta be a best practice we can follow here.
Yeah.
But I'd say if we were to have a meeting, whether we have 5 or 7 or whatever number of people at that meeting, I think we should be organized to address your concern about there can't be, you know, 100 questions coming from group collectively. So we need a process in advance to choose the questions. Or have it, you know, pre-identified who's gonna be asking them. But if we make it an open meeting, you notice it, and we have it here, don't do the Zoom thing, right? Let's just make it an in-person meeting. And I think that the vendor is gonna understand that if they're camped out in the audience, listening to us deliberate, that probably doesn't reflect very well on them. So I'd like to think that we'd have a small, maybe just us here to discuss it, and. You know, as we evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of different proposals, at the end of the day. I do think it's worth, you know, it's valid that there may be citizens who want to hear how we're evaluating different vendors. That's what transparency is all about. So I'm not too concerned about it. I mean, it's not like we're gonna be having like a hardcore negotiation saying, hey, how can we get them to knock 10% off the price? That's not the kind of discussion we're gonna be having, right? So I'm not too concerned about it.
And the point about seeing how their team, specific, whoever's gonna lead this thing, thinks on their feet. So by not giving them the question.
I think if we had like, if it turned out there was something that we wish we could put into the RFP, that's a question we're gonna ask of everybody, you know, please elaborate on your mobilization time or something, right? But in terms of the specific questions, I would expect them to be able to respond quickly. I'm hoping they'll be familiar enough with our project that they won't look like they're not prepared, so I like the idea of asking them in real time as opposed to in advance.
I like the idea of thinking on your feet. I think, I mean, I like if there's some questions we want to put out for them to address in their presentation, when we give them the agenda and the timetable, that's one thing, which I agree with you. But think I've been through so many of these over the last 30 years, and I think the best is when you are asked to think on your feet, because you're really getting a sense of how they interact as a team and whether they're in coordination and they really are, responding to what you need. Because if they have a week to prepare for a response, it's like an RFP, they had a week, they've had 3 weeks to respond to those questions, the RFP. So I'd like maybe some questions we could send out with the agenda. We want you to make sure you address these. This is the agenda, this is the flow. You have 35 minutes to present. We're gonna leave 25 minutes for Q&A, whatever we decide.
Yeah.
So they have a sense of the timetable and the sense of the time that we should have for Q&A. And we can send out some quick, some questions we want to address, but the rest of it, I'd rather have the majority of being think on your feet kind of questions.
Anyone else that's at the table have any comments?
I think when we're inviting the smaller group for interviews, we could just add a line that says, something like, as a professional courtesy, we appreciate it if you wouldn't be in the room at the same time. There's a little bit of notice, but I would be shocked if
They're gonna all show up.
but not be necessarily in the interview room.
Oh, no, well, not the interview. Yeah. I'm talking about when we're evaluating proposals, they might show up
But the back and forth
Yeah.
with the other.
Okay, oh, they won't be there. You can keep that, can you keep that interview private? I think we're-
I would not.
Really?
I mean,
The schools were-
I suppose technically you can't, but realistically.
I'm just trying to keep this board out of trouble.
I mean,
Yeah, no, I-
You can get another opinion and,
Okay.
Linda, did you have any?
Can we find out how the middle school did it?
Yeah, there must be other processes with that.
Yeah, I know how the elementary schools. did it,
Yeah,
but
Yeah,
just was it private or open to?
It was private,
I think, Willow was private.
yeah, Alcott and Berlin. And now granted, that's eons ago, but.
Okay. Another question regarding, we were talking about, you have a lot to do, if you, imagine if you got 30 proposals and you're was asked to do reference checks and that, I was just wondering, is there a requirement that we have to do reference checks on all of them, or do you do the reference checks on the 3 that we select for the interview?
I believe we included references as a criteria.
Right, but what I'm saying is a lot of times we put a proposal in, we don't get to the short list, so they don't check our references because they rather put the time into the top 3.
Right.
They put a real hardcore effort in, you only have a few days to do all this.
Right.
So that's the question, can you actually just focus on the top, or do you guys?
So they won't know the top 3 because we're gonna be doing the scoring while they're doing the reference checking concurrently.
Well, it seems to me that the reference check should be reinforcing strong proposal.
Yeah.
And I don't think it makes sense to go out and check
Yeah.
the reference for everybody. If we're down to the final 4 or 5, trying to get to 3, then maybe you check.
That's what I'm saying, I'll be, most of you're checking on the finalists, checking on all 30.
Right.
Because I mean, you're gonna be on the phone for, you're not gonna get through everybody.
Yeah.
It's more important to get through the top 3 or 4.
Totally agree.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm not sure, I'm gonna have to double check on the language that we put in the RFP regarding how references are gonna be included in
Well, we can just give them all 0, and that would make everything until it moves on to the interview process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
We're creating
I guess
equal.
we're trying to save town staff.
Oh, I get it, I
bandwidth,
appreciate
right?
it, and this has all been very valuable, I just don't wanna, I just have to double check that.
Okay. That makes sense. So are we?
We need to appoint a selection committee.
Yes, thank you. I've heard a few volunteers, which I was pretty psyched about, John and Scott. And Peter.
I'll do it, but I'd rather have you with all of your thinking on your feet stuff participating and someone from, and maybe Lee.
Yeah, you could replace, you guys, one of us could switch out from the interview to the review too, I mean, we don't.
Yes.
I don't think we need to worry about that. It's gonna be a selection committee of the whole, and it's gonna be noticed, so we don't have those quorum.
It's great.
Okay, okay.
Wonderful.
So either depending upon availability.
And we need to balance out the sexes here or something.
Yes.
Yeah,
Agree with that.
no,
I think there are reasons why I shouldn't be on it, so.
You had mentioned. And I have not had an opportunity to speak with Emily, but I am under the impression that Elizabeth may be a little bit maxed out in that. Yep, I see her. So
Yes,
you need-
correct. Thanks, Jen.
Okay, okay. So,
If you need me, I'll be there, you know. Your token, yes,
you're hardly a token.
but that would be in the initial group, or are we all in the initial?
we're all.
group?
We're all in initiative, so this is some group that's going to be doing I think a sub group that's gonna be focused on the interview. That's where I think we're trying to get
Is
to.
it a sub of a sub, or is this just a selection?
It's sorry, thank you for clarifying, it's a selection committee,
Okay.
yeah,
And there are enough copies coming in for all of us, for the town and for us.
Mhm.
Great.
I believe so.
Dan, I'm happy to join that if additional people are needed.
All right, thank you, Emily. All right, so somehow or other, we're going to figure out, thank you, everybody, for offering it up. I think that's a great cross-section of people, so.
And do we have a sense from the town who should participate, just as we think then about forming this?
I think you are going to be involved and, Anthony or Chris, and then my hope is that folks like Elizabeth and Alan will take a glance at them as well, so you can capture that feedback. I know they're all busy as well, so I'm reluctant to.
Are we talking about the interview as well, when you say that then?
I think Megan for sure, and I think Anthony for sure in the interview. I think, not necessarily the other folks.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just, presumably, there's gonna be a limited number of people on their side that they're gonna bring. I, for example, am not super keen. Despite my love for Scott, profess now out loud, I'm not, super keen on having business development folks here, because not primarily just because it's another person that are taking away from the people that are actually gonna do the work. Sorry, I'm really digging myself in the hole. So that's just so we can, when we queue things up, the agenda and the sort of description, we would say. These are the people we're looking for. Certainly, for example, community outreach person, economic, the land client. We want to make sure those folks are well represented.
So back to what Peter said, we're trying to appoint a selection committee. Does the advisory board as a whole need to do that, or can our chairs just simply say, we designated the following to the selection committee?
I like that idea. If that's everyone's okay with that, it's a lot more efficient.
I have confidence you guys will make the right decision.
So. Okay, so I've heard Megan and Anthony, Scott, Linda, myself, Dan and John, or Lee.
I think Emily.
Emily is.
And my offer.
Good.
So somehow we're gonna put them in an ultimate fighting arena and.
Well, something that would be helpful is, do we have the interview dates?
It's the
Yeah.
third, right?
The third with the snow day.
With the snow day, it's sixth, I think. You said Shannon?
And are we,
It would be the next day, so the fourth.
Okay.
Say that again.
and is it all, do we know, is it all day, or
It's just all that.
Well,
We have each other.
yeah, because they allow an hour, some deliberation between for each one, and if we stay with three, we can do it in a half a day. And I think we'll probably start in the morning, some 10 o'clock, whatever's reasonable.
So sorry, Dan, just so I'm certain, it's the third and potentially fourth.
Correct.
or,
Thank
or third or the fourth, I think.
Yeah,
Third or
third or the fourth.
Okay,
So ideally, we're gonna do all unless it's a snow day, Emily, we'll get them all done in one day.
okay.
Is there a minimum or number where narrowing down to from,
The selection committee?
no, the number of firms,
Oh, we want to get to three? Oh,
three.
Great.
Yeah.
and we
Three
said,
or four.
Peter said four or potentially five, but four, just in case, if there are two people that have
Three
the
to five.
same. And
Yeah, 3 to 5.
3 to 5.
We're gonna be nebulous.
But I would love it to be three personally.
What about limiting the amount of time per interview?
An hour max total. That's mine. This is a first opportunity for them to figure out how we're gonna put all this work into 3 months. Yes.
I don't have to go beyond the selection committee, but I have a question, the scope in the RFP is quite lengthy and there's things like zoning go past July 1st. We're gonna, do we as a advisory board, do we have a goal set for how far into the RFP services we want this firm to be select to go to by July 1st? In terms of what, because there's, as you know, there's 6 different tasks and like, is our goal to do everything but zoning? What are we gonna be communicating to them is gonna happen before July 1st?
I think it's a great question. My sense of the answer is, I think the simplistic answer is yes, if we will communicate that. Mark may have to add more specificity, but, I think it's everything but zoning.
Oh, that, I agree.
And that would be,
That'd be a good goal.
and Mark is,
Okay, you're going.
and Mark's talked about the possibility of figuring out how to.
Yeah, I mean, we need to structure this to be a project that goes past July 1st, no matter what. I think it's, we're hiring for expertise, so the expertise should guide us as to what's realistic and what's not realistic too. And so you have to listen to them. If somebody tells you that Rome can't be built in a day, maybe you should believe them. So that's, I'm gonna be looking for things like, are they, have they got the team already ready in place so they could start fast? And then have they really got a clear line of sight to what will be accomplished so that we know that we're meeting the stated goals. And then, I've said this before, I think that we need to concentrate on getting the right result, not be driven by some deadline that happens to be because the state turns out money.
And is there, we going through Simon or who we going through for communicating additional earmarks for the work beyond July 1st? Is there a I mean, I know he mentioned a deadline of like something like February, he needs to know.
I think the RFP, we asked them to itemize those costs and maybe that would help determine that once we selected the.
So he needs to know, right, almost like, once we retain.
In short order, yeah.
In short order, we have to give Simon some sense of that.
Yes.
I think so.
Well, he's probably aware of this already, but, when that number was come up with for the 725, that was just kind of a finger in the wind, right? There was no actual project scope behind that. He should probably be made aware that, we're not gonna be able to spend everything. At a minimum, that amount, the deficit should carry over, but it's probably also gonna, we're gonna wanna supplement it with something else. So the sooner he can start thinking about, well, how much does he ask for another 725 next year? I don't know how that process works exactly, but a conversation with him would probably be useful.
I think we should try to spend everything.
What's that?
We need to try to spend everything.
That's the message we've heard.
I agree with that. I think that what's probably more important for us to focus on though is as a town, before we can sign a contract, we have to be able to pay for that contract. And so we need to be prepared for the fact that, as we evaluate this, we should be thinking about this is going to be town resources and what the various sources are for that. I know we've also, as part of the planning, started to have some conversations about what, if anything, should appear on the town meeting warrant for this June town meeting is. It's going to say, it's gonna set up a project structure under which we can be authorized to spend and hopefully receive funds. So that we can smoothly move past this year-end process and, you know, if we're in zoning next year's year-end process. So that we're not having these conversations about how do we, you know, rush to spend money and, you know, for some fiscal year.
Yeah, just, I know that the Concord Housing Development Corporation approached the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust about putting $50,000 aside for planning for the Junction Village site. Could we sort of use that as sort of a backup in case we need to go over July 1st? Because that money's already been sort of committed by Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, so that if we need to, if things slide, then we could call on that and then, you know, just sort of look at that as an emergency reserve. Without some of the constraints that Simon's state money.
So Lee and Elizabeth and I, working as the legal and government affairs, have tried to talk about this before, that there are sources and uses of funds that are associated with getting the job done. So the two other groups, the land use group has the planning to do, the public outreach group has that work to do, and you're the spenders. And what we're trying to do on legal and government affairs is provide those resources and worry about how to map those up. So I think that, suffice to say that we'll come up with a proposal for, you know, do we set up some kind of, what is the funding mechanism that carries into fiscal 26? That is going to be supportive of the project expenditures that are associated with that, and then where are we going to try and get that? Are we looking at free cash? Are we looking at some kind of budget appropriation? Are we asking our legislative representatives to try and get an allocation from that? Will all, you know, can we get any grant funding? What are we doing? We'll worry about that. So, you know, again, I think what we're looking for is land use and public outreach to think about what's the best way to spend this money to get the planning done. And we'll worry about what's the best way to fund the spending that needs to be done.
So on that point, Mark, so the RFP goes through next November, or this November, I guess,
Right.
2025. The funding that Simon secured obviously only goes through June 30th. So, and if I remember correctly, for the town, for the budget that we just reviewed with the select board, I think we put about 400 aside for this RFP.
Yeah.
So let's presume that the responses come in above $400,000, because the $400,000 only takes them through task 4 of the RFP. So to complete task 5 and 6, let's say it comes in at $600,000 altogether, so there's a $200,000 gap. We then, the legal and government affairs committee is gonna work to figure out how to find funding from some bucket in the town to fill that $200,000 gap. And then beyond that, so for work that would then extend from November or December 2025 into and through June 2026. In pretty short order, working with our consultants, whoever they are when they're selected, I think working with them rapidly to put together a perspective on what that next phase is, call it tasks 7, 8, and 9. Would then help inform like an ask back to Rep. Cataldo. Am I thinking about that?
So in the RFP, we've asked them to give us a price for the zoning component.
Okay. So we just need that quickly.
I would simply communicate with Simon what our strategy is.
Right.
Just because he did say, let me know as soon as possible.
And I appreciate that we're setting aside town funds for this work potentially next year, but to the extent that we can get more from the state, Absolutely, we've got a lot of pressure on our budget already.
I'd like to see it as a contingency, like
Yeah,
first choice is state money. and then
Correct.
Fall back.
Yeah.
The communication to Simon will be through legal and governance or through you, Mark, or?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate, and, you know, when we started talking about the uses of the earmarks and, you know, what's available, what if any mechanisms might exist for using those funds or committing those funds by one date and using them slightly later, all of those kinds of things. I just feel like those are just somewhat distractions to the actual getting the work done, so we can handle that piece so that the consultant doesn't have to do that. Okay.
Anything further on that? Anybody? Okay. So the next order of business is update from the subcommittees, and you want to go first? I'm sorry, Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just gonna go on that.
Thank you.
Well, Mark, it sounds like you just put on our agenda to draft this summary of how the funds can be used in a memo and how we can get more funds. So we will be doing that. Also, we had not heard back from, at least I had not heard back from Mass DOT. So I assume we're gonna be part of that conversation since we were the ones who reached out to them. Can we be sure?
What we got was
on that?
What we got was an indicator that Mass DOT is expected to respond sometime soon to our letter.
Oh, great. That's
Which is
Soon be-
major progress in
Soon be
that.
this week,
They're coming up with that while they're
Yeah.
in traffic at the rotary.
yeah.
right. All right, we'll anticipate receiving something at some point, potentially from them. And then we also, while we're on this, Lee and Mark, I'm looking for final comments on another communication that we were gonna send out to everyone, so then we can start reaching out to Mass Historic and
Yeah.
more groups. So I guess that's where we are.
Actually, thank you for doing that. Well, I guess I can come back to it. There is folks may have seen a letter that we received from the historic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Requesting, a member be able to join as a liaison, so we can come back to that, because I want to interrupt this, but I do want to discuss that before we leave.
Okay.
So, Peter? I'm sorry, Elizabeth, we all set?
I'm all done.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we worked on the RFP and the interview process and came up with some ideas around initial ideas around questions and scoring. We worked with staff and they've given us a draft scoring sheet. And came out with initial ideas for who should be on it, and that's been subsumed by the conversation earlier this afternoon, so.
Evolved.
Yes. And that's about where we.
Okay, great. And so we have another meeting scheduled for next Tuesday? It's a question.
Let's see.
And do we want to have one? To sort of, it seems to me. What is that? That would be that would be the 14th.
I haven't sent a calendar invite out for one because it was unclear if these were gonna be bi-weekly. Or if the cadence of this full board is gonna change too.
On the 15th, we are due the questions, correct?
Yeah.
So we could theoretically push it a week if we feel like gives us enough time.
I have a conflict next Tuesday.
Okay, so maybe we push it, because then we can.
Yeah.
Then we can, with that,
So Tuesday, the 21st.
yep,
Okay.
and we can add, the Scott's idea about coming up with the agendas to share with folks, that's final selected. All right, thank you.
Okay, for community outreach, I would say things have been fairly quiet. Shannon has made some final changes to the webpage. One of the concerns we have is it's kind of hard to see all of our information online for citizens who want to see it. So I think it's all been very nicely streamlined, and so the next progress we'll see in that front will be after the consultant comes on, and, you know, we may do something like the middle school has a standalone website where we can have more graphics and everything else, but for now. The website's much improved from where it started, so that's great, thank you, Shannon. Next, we have a presentation scheduled for the Concord Business Partnership on the morning of February 5th. I'd love to know who would like to come to that. If you remember the way we handled meeting with voters,
Yeah.
there were several of us sitting up front, you could address different questions, so.
Happy to.
Yeah, I'm happy if you want me,
Can you comment?
absolutely.
I'd love to have at least one co-chair there, and
Okay.
have you guys there would be great.
So.
I'm on the board of the Concord Business Partnership. I don't know if that conflicts or means I should be there. I have no idea. I will be there anyway, so.
Okay,
What time is that at?
it's 7:30 AM on the 5th,
On the
location is still TBD.
2-5.
February 5, yeah. We are still working to arrange a tour of the site for the purpose of producing a video that we can put on our website so that curious citizens can see what the heck is there behind those walls. Minuteman Media is going to actually produce that for us. They're gonna supply a person with the drone, take some pictures, and then actually put the final video together for us, which is great, so we really appreciate their help. There's a Concord resident named Lee Cott, who I see Lee is actually on the call. Hello, Lee. Lee's an architect, and a photographer who's asked to come in and really document what we have there from a photographic standpoint. So Lee is standing by, waiting for confirmation of the time of that. And we thought it might be today or tomorrow, or yesterday or today. 6 or 7, but we have not heard back from the Department of Corrections, so we're waiting for the DOC to tell us we can go in there. And then finally, I guess we want to be sure, Legal and Government Affairs has been able to reach out to their stakeholders, proactively to say, hey, you know, we're here, we're aware that you need to stay abreast of what's going on. So if there's any help we can provide or content we can provide for that, let us know.
Thank you, John. All right, so I mentioned just a second ago that the Concord Historical Commission, I believe it was, had requested that, they wrote us a letter. Alan Magosian is the chair, requesting a member join. I think specifically they were looking to participate in the land use subcommittee. I got back to Ann this morning after some conversations with Mark and said, you're absolutely welcome to send a liaison, have a member join as a liaison for the full board. Before I didn't feel comfortable responding for the land use without having discussed it with that group, so.
I liked your written response, which was welcome to join us after we've selected the consultant. But let's put that on our agenda to confirm it.
All right, great, thank you. So that's all that's all. And the next section is, unless anyone else has anything? Nope. Okay, so it's public comment. And I don't think I see anyone. If there isn't any further business to do, I would accept a motion to adjourn. So second. So thank you, everyone.